The fork collided with the edge of the porcelain plate, producing a sound that seemed disproportionately loud, perhaps because, at that moment, everything felt amplified. The clinking of silverware, the subdued murmur of wine-fueled conversation, the sharp laughter of my wife, Selena, and, overshadowing it all, the silence that descended like dust after her mother's command, "Julian, clean the toilet now." I halted mid-cut, my knife embedded halfway through a garlic potato, and glanced up, genuinely believing she was joking. Claudia Westbrook, power attorney, socialite, queen of calculated moves. Coldness met my gaze, as if I were merely an object, no different from the staff who were compensated for their roles. I let out a brief, humorless chuckle. "Excuse me." Her unyielding stare pierced through me, sharp and precise, cutting through any pretense. I scanned the table, 12 seats occupied by individuals either too affluent or too apathetic to speak up. Selena remained unfazed, casually sipping her wine, her red lips gracefully encircling the rim as if nothing were amiss, as if this were all perfectly acceptable. "I refuse to clean your toilet," I stated, placing the knife down with care, establishing a clear boundary as if it were forged from stainless steel. The sound of a wine glass shattering drew my attention back to Claudia. Her hand remained raised, as if the broken glass served as an exclamation point she had intended all along. She leaned in close enough that her voice cut through the air without needing to be loud. "I'm a lawyer, Julian. I can frame you for anything. I will say you hit me. I will ensure you never work again. I'll send you to prison with one signature." I blinked, stunned, not because I believed her, but because I recognized her capability to follow through. Selena examined her face for any sign of discomfort, a protest, anything, but when she met my gaze, she smirked. "You have two options," she stated, "clean the toilet or go to jail." In that moment, everything changed. Not the fork, but my hope that perhaps beneath it all, she still saw me, loved me, believed in me. Instead, I saw nothing but convenience in her eyes. A man she kept like a pet, a butler with benefits, a mere footnote in her family's mansion. I stood slowly, the napkin slipping from my grasp, as the weight of silence enveloped the room like fog. Thick and suffocating, no one moved, not even Lord Biscuit, their spoiled Pomeranian, perched on a velvet cushion like a royal heir. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't throw a chair, I didn't make a scene, I just said, "Excuse me," and walked. But before I reached the hallway, I remembered my phone tucked in the front pocket of my button-down, still recording. I'd started the voice memo earlier that night, intending to capture Claudia's latest lecture for the private folder I kept labeled self-respect. I didn't expect it to record the moment After the marriage ended, I moved forward without hesitation. In the guest room, I efficiently packed a duffel bag with essentials, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and my laptop along with the backup drive. I placed my phone on the charger and uploaded the recording to my secure cloud folder. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline and a sense of liberation. Before departing, I took a moment to look in the mirror. I didn't appear to be a man on the run, but rather one who was awakening. The doorman didn't question my exit, and my car arrived within 2 minutes. As I settled into the back seat, I offered a brief acknowledgement. Instruction to the driver anywhere, but here he nodded. Drove. I stared out the window, my heart pounding. Selena's last words echoed in my head. "You have 2 options." No, I thought I had a third, because what Claudia and Selena didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that my father was Judge Malcolm Marsh, and while we hadn't spoken in years, tonight was the kind of night that rewrote the definition of emergency. I took a breath, pulled out my phone, and hit the name I hadn't touched since my mother's funeral. "Dad." His voice came through low and surprised. "Julian." My voice cracked. "I think I need help," and just like that the game changed forever. You'd be surprised how long you can convince yourself a cage is a castle when love is the wallpaper. That's how it started with Selena and me. I was in my final year of business school, sleep-deprived, overworked, burning through internships and bad coffee. She was the bright spot in my world, all elegance and ambition, the kind of woman who didn't walk into a room. She arrived when she loved me. It felt like sunlight breaking. Amidst the tumult of emotions, when she accepted my proposal, I felt as though I had struck gold. Little did I know, I was entering into a complex agreement, laden with nuances and unspoken rules. Selena's lineage, the Westbrook name, carried a weight that I was yet to comprehend. Her mother, Claudia, was a formidable force, adept at orchestrating negotiations with ease and wielding influence with a mere phone call. She possessed law firms as effortlessly as one might collect fashionable footwear, always maintaining an impeccable standard. From our very first encounter, I sensed the gravity of the world I was stepping into. I understood that I wasn't the ideal choice for her daughter. I was too ordinary, too sincere, lacking any notable legacy or financial backing. I was simply Julian Marsh, a man with aspirations and a partially used Metro card. Yet, Selena didn't mind, at least not at that moment. She appreciated my lack of wealth, claiming it made me authentic. I recall her fingers gliding over the collar of my thrifted jacket as she said, "You remind me of what matters." I should have paid more attention to the way she phrased it, as if I were merely an exhibit in a museum she would eventually outgrow. We exchanged vows in a whirlwind ceremony on a rooftop, surrounded by a carefully curated guest list. I encountered senators, CEOs, and individuals who engaged in handshakes without making eye contact. Claudia maintained a composed smile throughout the ceremony, though her eyes remained unyielding. When she embraced me, it felt like a predator assessing the warmth of its prey. "Welcome to the family," she whispered in my ear. "Try not to embarrass us." I laughed, albeit nervously, thinking she was joking. I had many thoughts during that first year, which went smoothly. We settled into our own apartment, a compact space in the city with creaky floors and a leaky faucet, but it felt like home. I was advancing in a fintech startup, progressing one pitch deck at a time, while Selena joined one of her mother's firms, expressing her desire not to rely too heavily on the Westbrook name. "I want to prove I can do this on my own," she told me, and I believed her. Then the merger occurred, and my company was absorbed in a restructuring deal, leading to the loss of my job. Disappeared overnight, severance paid 3 months' rent and not much else. I applied everywhere, but doors that once creaked open now slammed shut. Selena didn't panic. She suggested we stay with her mom just until we got back on our feet. Just until we moved into the Westbrook estate the following week, a marble-floored fortress with more rooms than sense and staff that changed every month. The guest suite was bigger than our entire apartment. Claudia had a wine cellar, a private sauna, and a 5-pound Pomeranian named Lord Biscuit who had. Initially, I managed my own wardrobe, convincing myself that the situation was only temporary. However, as days morphed into weeks, and weeks into months, I ceased applying to companies that clearly had no intention of hiring me. Instead, I focused on managing tasks around the estate, repairs, errands, and pet sitting. I reassured myself that I was contributing and being productive, but the reality was that I was fading away, bit by bit. Claudia never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. "Be useful or be gone," she'd say as she passed me in the hallway, her attention fixed on her phone. While cleaning out the pantry, I overheard her boasting to guests, "Yes, Selena's husband is between jobs, but he's quite the domestic, making a lovely roast chicken." It reached a point where even Lord Biscuit growled as I walked by, as if sensing my diminishing self-worth. Selena transformed as well. She began dressing more sharply, laughing more loudly, and discussing her firm as if it were a royal court and she was the heir. "Don't wait up," she'd say before vanishing to gala events. Whenever I asked if I could join, her response was always the same. It was primarily for partners and donors, and the implication was that it would be uninteresting for me. However, I found myself in a state of isolation, enveloped by opulence that felt suffocating. The thought of leaving crossed my mind, yet I had no destination, no employment, no savings. My pride had long been exchanged for silence. One evening, Claudia entered the kitchen while I was washing pots. Without a greeting, she simply looked at me and remarked, "You know Julian. Selena could certainly find someone better. She still can." I rinsed the pot and caught a glimpse of my reflection in the steel. I remained silent, nodded, dried my hands, and retreated upstairs. I lay beside a woman who once referred to me as her forever, yet she didn't even turn to face me. They wanted me to erase my identity, to accept that this version of myself, the man in borrowed quarters with borrowed dignity, was the only reality. But I remembered, and that memory was poised to become my most potent weapon. I had barely slept for 2 hours when I awoke in that motel room, feeling stiff. Mattress buzzing wall light and the low hum of someone arguing in the hallway. The room smelled like bleach and desperation, yet it was the first place in months where I felt something close to safe. I rolled over the recording from last night, still fresh in my mind, Claudia's voice cold and sharp playing on loop, Selena's smirk when she delivered that ultimatum, the sound of the wine glass hitting the floor like a gavel, like a verdict. I sat up, opened my laptop, and replayed the audio from my phone. "You have 2 options, clean the toilet or go to jail." Then Claudia's voice, "Let's say he hit me, my word will bury him. I'm a lawyer. I stared at the waveform of the recording, each spike and dip a reminder that they hadn't just humiliated me, they'd threatened me for weeks, maybe longer. They'd been joking about how easily they could make me disappear. It wasn't just emotional abuse anymore, it was strategic, intentional, criminal. I uploaded the audio to 3 different cloud drives, each under a different account name. I encrypted a copy to a flash drive I always kept on hand. My keying was a precaution, a reminder of what I was preparing for, yet an inner voice cautioned me, don't trust peace, prepare for conflict. My phone rang with an unknown number, and I hesitated to answer. Then I noticed the time, 6:02 a.m. They still hadn't reached out, not Selena, not Claudia, not even a passive-aggressive text. That silence resonated louder than anything. They weren't concerned about my absence. They were assured I would return, as I always had. I had absorbed their commands, their corrections, their condescension. There was a mistaken belief that tolerance equated to love and endurance represented strength, but this time was different. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't engaged with in nearly 7 years. Dad, Judge Malcolm Marsh. The man I hadn't spoken to since the day we laid my mother to rest. Our last words had been filled with bitterness and heat. I had accused him of controlling her illness, of prioritizing procedure over compassion, while he had accused me of running away. And I had. Yet, grief alters the atmosphere within a home, turning warmth into ice. I thought the distance would lessen with time, but it did not. In that moment, I found myself without anyone else to reach out to. I hesitated briefly before pressing the green button. The phone rang once, then twice, and finally, Julian answered. His voice remained unchanged, deep and steady, the kind that commanded attention and respect. "Dad," I said, and suddenly my throat tightened with emotion. "I think I need help." He didn't immediately inquire about the details. Instead, he simply asked, "Where are you?" I provided him with the motel address. "I'll be there in 30. For the next 29 minutes, I paced, not just from anxiety, but from a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time, relief. When he arrived, he didn't knock like a guest. He knocked with authority. I opened the door to see the same man I had grown up with, silver streaks now more pronounced in his hair, yet his posture remained unyielding. He didn't embrace me, but his eyes conveyed a sense of concern. "What happened?" he asked, and I played the recording. He listened in silence, no interruptions, no expressions, just stillness. When it ended, he let out a slow breath and sat down in the stiff motel chair. "We go to court," he said simply, "but we do it the right way." "Claudia is a monster," I said, and Selena just stood there. "She laughed, Dad." "She thinks you're trapped," he said, leaning forward. "But she's wrong. You've got the one thing that people like that don't have." I frowned. "What evidence?" he said. "And a conscience." I smiled faintly. "I thought you were going to say a judge for a father." He looked at me seriously. "That helps, but I won't try your case." "I can't. You need someone outside the family. But I'll help you find the right attorney, and I'll be there as your father." This time, I nodded, and something inside me shifted. I untied a knot I hadn't realized had been formed since the day we ceased communication. The following morning, I submitted a formal complaint regarding civil harassment, intent to defame, and attempted coercion. My name, Julian Marsh, was now linked to a case file, a case poised to challenge the stronghold Claudia Westbrook had constructed meticulously over the years. I anticipated an immediate backlash, yet none came. Instead, it felt as though they were strategizing. However, I too had a plan, and this time, I wasn't on my own. My father's house remained largely unchanged, still chilly in the mornings. Still carried a subtle scent of polished wood and the same brand of pipe tobacco he hadn't actually smoked in over a decade. It wasn't home, not exactly, but it felt more secure than anything I had experienced in the past year. He prepared coffee strong enough to revive the weary and handed me a cup without uttering a word. That was his approach. He had never been one for comfort, but he valued action, and at that moment, that was precisely what I required. After filing the complaint, the real work commenced. My dad referred me to someone he had confidence in, Kale. Initially, I was uncertain about what to expect. She appeared youthful, hardly 30, with a sharp bob haircut and an even sharper tongue. As she entered our initial meeting at her downtown office, she held a folder in one hand and a black coffee in the other. "You're the guy who married into the lion's den," she remarked, flipping open the file. "The good news is you've got teeth." I handed her the flash drive. "I've got more than that." We listened to the recording together. Her expression remained unchanged until Claudia's threat echoed through the speakers like poison. "I'm a lawyer. I'll frame you and send you to prison." Then Selena's voice rang clear. "Clean the toilet or go to jail." Robin leaned back in her chair, her eyes locked on mine. "Do they know you have this?" "No," I replied. "Not yet." "Good," she said, smiling like a wolf. "Let's keep it that way." Over the next 2 weeks, we built the case, and Robin brought in a forensic audio expert. To verify the authenticity of the recording, we gathered texts, voicemails, and every documented instance of abuse, whether intentional or not. Throughout this process, Selena and Claudia remained silent. No calls, no messages, not even a cease and desist. This silence suggested one of two possibilities. Either they were confident in their ability to overpower me, or they were caught off guard. My father never voiced his concerns, but I sensed a change in him. He observed me more intently, asked more probing questions, and even stayed up late the night we compiled our witness list. I reached out to former housekeepers, a few neighbors, and even a landscaper who had once witnessed Claudia's outburst when I trimmed a hedge too short. I expressed my concerns that they might be hesitant to testify. My father assured me they would come forward when they realized they were not alone. He was correct. Gradually, people began to share their stories, revealing details I had previously overlooked. A former maid named Vera recounted an incident when Claudia hurled a crystal vase against the wall after I mistakenly brought home the wrong brand of mineral water. A chauffeur recalled how Selena boasted about her ability to ruin Julian. Single tear if he ever got uppity. Robin was relentless. She coached me through statements, prepped documents, dissected every possible legal angle. "They think you're just a disgruntled husband," she said. "Let the middle make your victory feel like a sucker punch." Then came the court date. Claudia was served a legal notice, civil complaint, and protection order effective. Immediately Selena was listed as a supporting party the morning they received it. Selena texted me for the first time in weeks. "You're serious? You really want a war?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, "No, I want peace." "But you handed me a battlefield." She didn't respond. Later that night my father sat across from me in his study. He had pulled out an old file, my mother's last case. She'd been an advocate for domestic abuse survivors. She died fighting for someone else's freedom. "You're more like her than you realize," he said, voice low. "She would have been proud of this fight." I didn't reply. I just nodded, the lump in my throat making words impossible. The next morning Robin called me. "They've lawyered up," she said. "Big firm, expensive, but arrogant." "Do they know about my father?" "No, but they're about to." She paused. "Julian, he can't preside over your case." "I know," I said. "Ethics, conflict of interest, right? But if by some twist of fate he were assigned and neither side objects." I smiled slowly. "You're saying it's possible?" She grinned. "It's the system." Strange things happened, and strange things did when the hearing date. When the list of presiding judges was released, I noticed the name of the Honorable Malcolm Marsh. I glanced at my father, who was seated across the breakfast table, methodically buttering his toast. He remained silent, simply handing me the newspaper as if the world around us had not shifted. Yet, I understood that everything had changed. The first time I encountered the headline, I was in a corner booth of a diner just off the courthouse square, sipping weak coffee and attempting to avoid overthinking. But there it was, prominently displayed on the front page of the Westbrook Journal, a publication I knew Claudia had. Over the years, a prominent attorney has donated thousands, now facing coercion accusations from an unusual son-in-law. A photo of Claudia from a charity gala, where she dazzled in a silver gown, was used, with a caption that portrayed her as royalty under siege. Although Selena wasn't mentioned by name yet, it was only a matter of time. The press had caught a whiff of controversy, and for the first time in her career, Claudia found herself unable to control the narrative. That afternoon, Robin called me, her voice a mix of amusement and adrenaline. "They're spinning," she said. "They're claiming you were unstable and aggressive, that Claudia feared for her safety." I let out a dry laugh. She feared me while I was folding laundry in their guest house. Robin didn't laugh. "They're playing the long game, Julian, and they've got media influence, but we have something more powerful." I met her at her office that evening, and she played a set of audio files I hadn't heard before. In one, Selena was on the phone, probably with Claudia, laughing. "He still thinks we love him. It's adorable, really. I might cry just to see him squirm," she said. Claudia's voice suggested that he might be mentally unstable after he yelled at me. It's astonishing to think we could transform his room into a wine cellar by Christmas. Their laughter, so casual and assured, filled the room, and I sank back into the chair, stunned once more. They immersed themselves in the situation, and Robin's eyes narrowed, urging them to continue digging. A few days later, Selena's legal team contacted us with their initial offer: a private settlement that would avoid court appearances and media attention, accompanied by a non-disclosure agreement and a check with more zeros than I had encountered in years. Robin raised an eyebrow. When she read the email, they were apprehensive, and rightly so. I suggested declining to see how far they were willing to go. The next day, Claudia's side increased the offer, followed by a letter, not from her, but from her PR team. It was an apology crafted in sterile, lawyer-approved language, filled with terms like miscommunication and misunderstandings, expressing sincere regret. They didn't truly know me, not anymore. I had no interest in their money or their pity. I wanted the world to hear the truth in Claudia's own voice, in Selena's cruel laughter, and I wanted them to grasp that not every man is married into power is weak enough to stay beneath it. Then came the subpoena pushback. Claudia filed a motion to dismiss the recording as illegally obtained, but Robin shut it down in a single hearing. The plaintiff recorded a conversation he was a direct participant in. She argued that it is not only legal, it's protected. Selena tried her own tactic. She sent me a message through a mutual friend: "You're ruining us. Is that what you really want?" I replied only once: "You ruined yourselves. I'm just holding up the mirror." They didn't write again, but stories began to emerge from anonymous sources in tabloid columns, alleging that I had anger issues and was erratic following my job loss, suggesting I felt emasculated living under their roof. This narrative seemed crafted to undermine my credibility, portraying me as a potentially dangerous individual. However, each statement they made provided us with more evidence to counter their claims. I had receipts, including texts from Selena reminding me, "Don't forget to vacuum Lord Biscuit's room," as my mother became irritable over dog hair on the velvet. I possessed videos from Christmas Eve where I was serving dinner while Claudia referred to me as the help in a husband costume. Additionally, I had time-stamped audio clips from parties where Claudia boasted about allowing Julian to live with us, claiming that was charity enough. Robin meticulously compiled everything like a symphony, creating an organized and undeniable case. As she pointed out one evening, they were not merely hypocrites, they were bullies. As word of the case spread, I began receiving calls from reporters, podcast offers, and even a documentary opportunity. The producer reached out via email to inquire if I would be open to appearing on camera. I respectfully declined all offers for the time being, as this situation transcended mere clicks or ratings. It was fundamentally about justice. The real impact hit 2 days prior to the trial when Robin presented me with a folder containing statements from 3 former employees of Claudia, individuals I had never interacted with. One had been a junior associate at her firm, while the others were housekeepers who had worked at the estate years earlier. Each of them had overheard her discussions about how simple it is to destroy someone who lacks financial resources. "Willing to testify, they're not afraid anymore," Robin stated, "because you weren't." I observed the stack of papers, the names and signatures revealing for the first time Claudia's empire, one constructed on fear, silence, and control, beginning to fracture. This time, it wasn't just me amidst the debris, it was everyone she attempted to suppress beneath it. The morning of the trial was marked by rain, not the fleeting kind, but a heavy, purposeful downpour that penetrated everything, saturating clothes and nerves alike. I took a seat at the back of. As we arrived at the courthouse, Robin's car came to a stop, and we observed the rain cascading down the windows, resembling ink on a page that could not be altered. This was the moment we had been waiting for. No more postponements, no more proposals. Today, everything would be revealed within the courtroom. The atmosphere transformed the instant Claudia entered. She wore a tailored charcoal gray suit, her signature pearls adorning her neck, and her chin held high, exuding an air of indifference towards the proceedings. Selena followed closely behind, dressed in sleek designer black, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. It appeared as though they were entering a boardroom rather than facing a reckoning. I remained composed when they noticed me. Selena's gaze met mine for a brief moment, devoid of warmth or remorse, only calculation. Claudia didn't acknowledge me at all, gliding past with the poise of someone accustomed to viewing others merely as obstacles. The courtroom filled swiftly, journalists occupied the benches, and spectators murmured. Even the bailiff seemed tense. Then the doors opened to reveal the presiding judge, the Honorable Malcolm Marsh, prompting every head to turn, while Claudia maintained her smirk. Selena faltered and froze, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering frantically, likely seeking confirmation of what her eyes were revealing. My father stepped onto the bench, his robe as dark as the storm clouds outside. He appeared older, yes, but also stronger, grounded, and completely unshaken. Claudia's lawyer, a sharp-jawed man named Harlan Quinn, stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we'd like to raise a concern regarding impartiality." My father raised an eyebrow, cool and composed. "Proceed. Judge Marsh is the plaintiff's father. We believe his involvement compromises the fairness of this hearing." My father remained composed. "You are welcome to file a formal motion to transfer jurisdiction, but considering your client's threats were directed at my son's liberty and reputation, shouldn't she have considered this before challenging the legal system she claims to respect?" Harlan opened his mouth, then closed it as the courtroom buzzed. My father continued, his voice steady. "Unless there is concrete evidence of bias, I will proceed. Let the record show both parties have been informed of their rights. Right to object or appeal." No one moved. Claudia sat stiffly, arms crossed, lips pursed as if she had just tasted something bitter. My father gave a small nod. "Let's begin." Robin stood and opened with a quiet confidence that cut deeper than any theatrics ever could. "This case is not about wealth, it's not about family dynamics, it's about abuse of power. My client was threatened, humiliated, and manipulated, not by strangers, but by the very people who claimed to love him." She played the audio recording, and the courtroom fell silent. First came Claudia's voice. "It is evident that a strategic approach is being employed here. If he were to strike me, my response would be decisive, as I am a lawyer. Selenas, you have a choice. Clean the toilet or face incarceration." The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically, with audible gasps and changes in body language. Reporters hastily jotted down notes. Claudia maintained a facade of composure, though her jaw was visibly tense. Selena's complexion paled, and Robin chose to halt the recording, allowing the silence to amplify the tension. Subsequently, she introduced the witnesses, including housekeepers, the landscaper, and even a former colleague of Claudia's, who recounted instances where she had made light of the situation. Controlling Julian like a train, Mud Harland attempted to discredit them. "She's a disgruntled former employee," he stated regarding one witness. Robin countered, "So are most people who flee abusive employers. That doesn't make them liars." Then it was Selena's turn. She took the stand in a tailored outfit designed to convey the image of a grieving wife, but her smirk betrayed her. She tried to clarify the recording, insisting it was taken out of context and was merely a joke. Robin stepped forward, asking, "Do you often joke about sending people to jail?" "No," Selena replied, then paused. Realizing too late that her answer contradicted her entire argument, Robin pressed on. "Do you remember texting your mother saying, and I quote, 'We'll turn his bedroom into a wine cellar once we've dealt with him'?" Selena hesitated. We were venting." Her father leaned forward. "Is it normal for people in your household to vent by discussing how to imprison family members?" Selena blinked. "No, sir." "And yet you did." She looked down. Robin delivered her closing with intensity. This wasn't a miscommunication, it was a coordinated effort. The act of cruelty represented the manipulation of legal knowledge against a vulnerable individual, but that was no longer the case. I observed Claudia. She appeared diminished, her confidence visibly eroded, her posture sagging like a deflated balloon. For the first time, she averted her gaze, a clear sign of shame. My father announced that court would reconvene tomorrow, with the verdict set to be delivered at noon. As the gavel struck, the room gradually emptied. As I exited, I caught a whisper behind me. He didn't flinch once. They were correct, for I was no longer that man. The night before, sleep eluded me. The verdict loomed over me, not out of fear, but because the echoes of their voices persisted. Claudia's threats, Selena's laughter, the condescending way they dismissed me as if I were merely a blemish in their meticulously crafted lives. I reclined on the pull-out sofa in my dad's study, observing the headlights flicker against the walls. Counting them like seconds. The silence enveloping the house was deafening. I wasn't merely anticipating a verdict. I was waiting to discover if the world was finally ready to acknowledge the truth. As I moved through the elegantly draped doors, the morning light illuminated my reflection. I took my time shaving and dressing, studying the man in the mirror. Gone was the individual who once folded napkins at the Westbrook estate, yearning for a hint of recognition. The person gazing back now understood the strength within. The courthouse hummed with anticipation before the doors opened, reporters gathered like bees, their microphones poised. I chose to disregard them, walking past as if they were invisible. Today was not for them, it transcended vengeance, it was a quest for validation. Inside, Claudia was already seated, dressed in another power suit, this one navy, perhaps in a final attempt to envelop herself in dignity. However, the corners of her eyes had caved inward, and her lips were pinched so tightly they were nearly colorless. Selena appeared no better. Gone was the icy smirk, replaced by a drawn expression and fidgeting hands under the table, as if she could transform anxiety into innocence. Robin sat beside me, her voice low. "You ready?" I nodded. She offered a small grin. "Good, because this is where giants fall." The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise for—" The Honorable Judge Malcolm Marsh entered the courtroom, his robes flowing with an air of authority. He surveyed the room, embodying the weight of both law and legacy. After a thorough review of the evidence, he spoke with a tone that was both precise and deliberate. "The court finds the defendant Claudia Westbrook guilty of attempted coercion and the issuance of false legal threats." A sharp gasp echoed from the gallery as I turned my gaze to Claudia, who blinked slowly, as if rebooting from a system crash, seeking reassurance from those around her. As the lawyer offered nothing but a slow exhale, the atmosphere in the courtroom felt suffocating. My father continued, "In addition to this ruling, the court recommends an immediate review of Ms. Westbrook's law license by the State Bar due to the gravity of the threats and the recorded intent to manipulate the justice system. Further disciplinary action may be warranted." He then turned toward Selena, stating, "As for Miss Selena Westbrook," his tone narrowing slightly, "though not a named defendant, her active participation in the threat cannot go unacknowledged. The court issues a permanent protection order on behalf of Mr. Julian Marsh, effective immediately." Selena shot to her feet, exclaiming, "It was a joke. I didn't mean it like that." My father's gavel cracked down once. "Sit down, Miss Westbrook." She froze, dropping back into her chair, her eyes glassy with disbelief. "The court further orders that all attempts to contact, defame, or otherwise harass Mr. Marsh cease immediately. Marsh be treated as violations of this order and will carry legal consequences. Additionally, Mr. Marsh is awarded a financial penalty in the amount of $250,000 for damages to be paid jointly by Claudia and Selena Westbrook." Claudia finally moved, but not to protest. She simply folded her hands in her lap and stared at nothing, her face hollow. She wasn't a woman who lost often, maybe never. And yet here she was exposed, powerless. As I stood prepared to leave, Selena muttered, "You've ruined us." I leaned in close enough for only her to hear, "You did that the moment you chose to humiliate the man who loved you." I didn't look at Claudia. There was nothing left to say to her, Robin, and I stepped into the corridor surrounded by flashes and shouts, but none of it touched me, none of it mattered. I had stood up against one of the most powerful women in the state, and I had won. My father met me outside the courthouse. We didn't hug, but we shook hands, firm, steady. Something passed between us, not just approval, pride, maybe even healing, I wasn't sure. "It would ever come to this," he said quietly. "Me neither," I replied, "but it had to." He nodded. "Once you stood taller than I ever taught you to, and that meant more than the ruling." As I walked toward the street, reporters calling my name, microphones in my face, I finally paused. A young journalist asked, "Mr. Marsh, what do you say to people who claim you only won because your father was the judge?" I looked at her dead in the eyes. "I didn't win because of who my father is. I said, I won because of what they did." Then I kept walking, because I wasn't the story they wanted. I was the one they never saw coming. The news traveled faster than I expected. By the time I got home that evening, home being the modest, quiet apartment I'd rented just outside the city, Claudia's face was already plastered across 3 different evening broadcasts. The headlines didn't soften the blow. Legal powerhouse Claudia Westbrook suspended after coercion verdict. Family feud turns legal firestorm. Westbrook dynasty on the brink. The judge has ruled in favor of the son-in-law in a surprising case of abuse of power. I refrained from gloating or smiling. Instead, I turned off the TV, poured a glass of water, and sat on the floor, not on the couch or in a chair. Sometimes, after emerging from a difficult situation, it's important to feel the stability of something that remains firm beneath you, something that doesn't deceive. Robin texted me, saying, "You did it. They're calling it a landmark case." The state bar panel meets next week. Proud of you. I replied, thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. Selena's call came from an unknown number. I stared at it, allowing it to ring, and then it rang again. I wanted to answer because I needed someone like her after everything fell apart. Her voice was small and shaky. Julian, there was silence on my end. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear I never thought you'd actually, win that. Did it? I asked, my voice flat. You thought I'd crawl back, let you and your mother turn me into your next cautionary tale? I was angry, she said, and scared, she said. We had to make sure you didn't flip the story. I let out a slow breath. There was no fear, Selena. You were at ease, and it is in such ease that cruelty flourishes. You dismantled everything that brought me genuine joy, the kind that resonates deeply. No, you did that the moment you forced me to choose between my self-respect and your validation. Can we have a conversation, just the two of us? I didn't raise my voice or hurl insults. I simply stated, you are no longer a part of us, and ended the call. The following morning, Claudia issued a statement that felt as artificial as plastic. While I do not concur with the court's ruling, I acknowledge the legal process and will fully engage with the disciplinary review. My dedication to justice remains steadfast. There was no apology, no accountability, merely a facade. However, it became irrelevant as the public had grown weary of her by Friday, with 3 significant clients severing ties with her firm and another firm lodging a breach of ethics complaint. Journalists uncovered accounts from former employees who chose to remain anonymous. Regarding her detrimental leadership approach, her explosive reactions, and her intimidating threats, the Westbrook name transformed from a symbol of success to one associated with controversy. Selena also encountered repercussions. Her firm declared an indefinite leave of absence, and shortly after, she vanished from social media. Them and I listened. I showed up one day after a group session. A kid named Aaron, barely 20, pulled me aside. You're the guy from the trial, right? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. He smiled. Thanks for not being a suit. Most guys like you, they forget. I didn't forget. I remembered every word Claudia threw at me like daggers. Every time Selena treated me like an inconvenience instead of a partner. I remembered folding laundry while they dined on steak and whispered about cutting me out of my own life. And I remembered the sound of the gavel when justice finally echoed back. It wasn't the verdict that broke them, it was the exposure, the light they couldn't hide from anymore, the truth they'd built their lives trying to deny. And I had been the one to turn the switch, not out of revenge, but because I needed to know that a man like me, quiet, hardworking, once invisible, could stand up to power and say no more and be heard. The apartment was nothing like the estate. 2 bedrooms, laminate floors, a view of the corner grocery store instead of a in the skyline. I found a space where I could truly breathe. There were no housekeepers passing by with forced smiles, no Pomeranian draped in silk, and no Claudia exuding intimidation. It was just me, a half-wilted plant in the window, and the silence I had rightfully earned. I woke up without waiting for instructions, ate when I felt hungry, and walked barefoot across the floor, embracing it as my own for the first time in years. Each creak of the wood no longer felt like judgment. It was a testament to my freedom. I accepted a consulting position with a small logistics firm downtown, a role that was understated yet fulfilling. There were no press releases or cocktail events, yet the kindness of the people and the integrity of the work stood out. During my first time in the break room, someone asked for my thoughts on a project, not to flatter or test me. I found myself momentarily speechless, as it had been ages since my opinion was regarded as valuable rather than merely tolerated. Outside of work, I began volunteering twice a week at a youth mentorship program run by a friend of Robin's, providing support for young men who had been falsely accused, manipulated, or mistreated. To feel like they had no voice the first time I walked in and told a group of them that I'd been through it too, I watched something shift. They leaned forward, they listened, because I wasn't just another adult lecturing them. I was proof that surviving wasn't a theory, it was possible. One night after group, I stayed behind to help a boy named Devin fill out paperwork, 17 sharp, guarded with a quiet fear behind his eyes that reminded me too much of myself. He looked up suddenly and asked, "How do you stop hating them?" I thought about that. You don't, I said, honest. Not all at once and not every day, but eventually the hate stops owning you. That's the difference. He nodded slowly like he didn't believe me yet, but wanted to. I understood that too. The press eventually moved on. Claudia's firm lost half its clients. The federal audit triggered by the case revealed several HR violations and suspicious legal billings. She wasn't disbarred yet, but she was cornered publicly, professionally, and permanently. She issued a follow-up statement 2 months after the verdict. This one was less polished, fewer platitudes, more edge. I will rebuild what was taken from me. She wrote, "Legacy is not determined by scandal." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her legacy was already sealed in court transcripts, in news clippings, in the recordings I kept locked away, untouched but not forgotten. As for Selena, I never saw her again in person, but word traveled. Her departure from the firm became a resignation. The Westbrook name became a liability in the legal community. Friends distanced themselves. She was spotted at a few upscale lounges. Once in Miami, once in D.C., always alone. A mutual acquaintance remarked that she appeared thinner, quieter, like someone observing their own life unraveling. They mentioned she attempted to call one last time, leaving a voicemail. "I know you probably won't listen to this, but I did love you once. I think. I don't know anymore." I just wanted to express that I deleted it, not out of spite, but because I no longer required that kind of closure. My father and I maintained contact. It wasn't perfect, as we still endured years of silence between us, but we discussed the realities of work life and even grief. One Sunday, we sat on his porch, sipping coffee as we had in the past before my mother passed. "You were brave," he remarked softly. "No," I replied, feeling weary, but I chose not to remain silent any longer. He nodded, acknowledging that sometimes that is the most courageous act of all. There were still days when I questioned everything, moments when I would awaken from dreams where I was still in that house, still holding a plate at Claudia's dinner table, waiting for permission to leave. However, those days occurred less frequently. When they did, I established a new routine. I took a walk, no phone, no destination, just step after step, reminding myself that I wasn't there anymore, that I had chosen to leave, and that choice transformed everything. Freedom didn't arrive with grand gestures. It manifested in small moments, like sipping coffee from my own chipped mug, ignoring the buzzing of a phone to which I had no response, and standing in a room without questioning my place. One night, I stood on the balcony as the city lights flickered softly in the distance. The air was cool, and the sky was gentle with stars. I softly uttered a straightforward phrase into the darkness. I made it. For the first time in years, I truly believed it. A year later, I found myself in a serene cafe overlooking the lake, a gentle breeze flowing through the open windows, rustling the pages of my notebook. The world had finally found its stillness. No subpoenas, no reporters, no threats lurking behind polished smiles, just tranquility. The kind that demands no permission and offers no apologies for its existence. The barista approached with my usual order, a black coffee and a cranberry scone, accompanied by a knowing nod. I wasn't recognized, and I appreciated that. I was no longer Julian Marsh, son-in-law of Claudia Westbrook. I had shed the labels of headlines and courtroom symbols. I was simply a man with a renewed opportunity to tell my own story. Robin settled into the seat across from me, sunglasses resting on her head and a legal brief peeking out from her tote. She seemed to have transitioned from my lawyer to someone more aligned with the creative path she had quietly embraced. "What are you working on this time?" "Fiction," she inquired, glancing at my notebook. I smiled and replied, "Memoir, perhaps. I'm calling it How'd. I survived the wealthy, the merciless, and the principled." I paused, perhaps too dramatically, and she laughed. "You earned a little drama." We sipped our drinks in a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists when people have faced battles together and emerged intact. Eventually, she leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You could have ruined them more, you know. Taken the interviews, written the exposé. You had every reason." I met her gaze, unwavering. "I didn't need to. I wasn't trying to destroy them, I just wanted to be free." She nodded, as if she understood, because she did. The distinction between revenge and release is significant. One binds you to the past, while the other allows you to move forward unburdened by anger. Claudia had yet to regain her footing. Her firm had diminished to half its former size, clients departed, and interns ceased seeking her guidance. The bar investigation continued, and although she had not been disbarred, her reputation had tarnished. While people still spoke of her, it was now in hushed tones. Selena, on the other hand, had completely withdrawn from the public sphere. The last update I received indicated she was residing out of state, engaged in freelance paralegal work. Under a different name, some people described her as humbled, while others perceived her as bitter. I ceased asking for updates. My interest in the various versions of herself she attempted to salvage had waned. I finished my coffee and opened my laptop, typing a few lines of the post I had been drafting for weeks. Freedom doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet of your own breath during a morning you no longer dread, in a name you no longer allow others to rewrite. As I wrote, a man passed by my table and paused, squinting at me. "Hey, aren't you that guy?" From the toilet trial, I chuckled quietly to myself. Yes, I acknowledged that was me. He shook his head in amazement, exclaiming how wild it was. What a story! He moved on before I could reply, leaving me to reflect for a moment. His words resonated more than he realized. That guy from the toilet trial. That's how people remembered me. An absurd, unbelievable moment when a man was asked to clean a toilet at a dinner table, reduced to a punchline by a family, only to stand up and walk away. But I was no longer that guy. I was Julian Marsh. I had settled my rent 6 months ahead of time. I prepared my own meals, wore a genuine smile effortlessly, and enjoyed restful nights without the need for medication. I remained unfazed when my name was called. Occasionally, I would dream of that house, recalling the piercing gaze of Claudia and the unspoken conversations that lingered in the air. Yet, I always awoke in my own bed, enveloped by walls I had chosen, and that was the ultimate triumph. Not the headlines, nor the public disgrace, but a profound sense of peace, something they could never replicate, regardless of the figures attached to their names. Robin gathered her belongings, prompting me to follow suit. "Know when the book's done," she said. "I will," I replied. "And if they ever show up again?" "They won't," I said. "But if they do, I'll be ready." She smiled. "That's my guy." When she left, I sat for a while longer, watching the light play across the lake. My reflection stared back at me from the glass window. Not the man who folded napkins in silence, not the man who apologized for existing, but someone whole, someone home. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and walked away. This time, not because I had to, but because I could.